on what possibly Harold Perkins could be dealing with, what LSU could be dealing with when you lose, potentially one of your best players, especially when you're talking about on the defensive side of the ball. So we will talk about what's next for Perkins and what's next for LSU coming up. But let's give our reaction to the game. Obviously, that was a huge piece of the game, was Harold Perkins getting knocked out in the second half and not returning. And what, obviously could be with Perkins is devastating to think about if, in fact, it is ACL, which we will hear from Brian Kelly today at noon, and I'm sure he will be asked about that, and we'll give some insight on what the future looks like. But the 34-17 win for LSU, extremely ugly, right? Extremely efficient yet again from the quarterback position. When you talk about Garrett Nussmeier is playing at a level. His 352 yards, 3 touchdowns the other night. He engineered 2 90-plus yard drives in the same game, which has not been done in over 18 years here in this program, at LSU's program. I mean, things that you say out loud that are very, very impressive when you think about the quarterbacks that have come through here and the offenses and the teams that have come through here in that time period. Nussmeier is playing the quarterback position, and we have been, it's crazy to say out loud, blessed over the last couple of years to see it played at a very high level, maybe the highest of level within college football 2 out of the last 5 years, and Nussmeier is fitting in the way that he is carrying on the standard of that position. He throws as good and as catchable of a football. And when I say catchable, I mean he is timing guys right. He's leading them right. He's putting them in a position where they can catch it and run it. I don't know if you could hand off the ball to Kyle Parker as accurate as that ball was thrown. I mean, that is Drew Brees type accuracy. I mean, that is pinpoint. Don't show me the target. Show me the thread within the target that you want me to hit. I mean, I'm trying to think of a pass that has been more accurate than that in what we've seen. That was as impressive as a deep ball that has been thrown in that stadium that we've seen. I mean, and that's just one of them. I mean, when you talk about him, the ability to layer throws over linebackers' heads into the third and second level of the field, the way that he gets through his progression. I mean, his stat line early on the game would have been perfect if it not been for, like, face masks type drops. I mean, he hit Kyron Lacey in the head with the ball. And he is just playing at an ultimate level when you're talking about the quarterback position. You look around college football, and, you watch. I watched a ton of college football this weekend, and there were some really standout games. There were some surprises. There were some really high-end performance. There were some performances that you thought you were going to see a little bit better of that you may not have. But one thing that has been constant for LSU in an inconsistent sport of college football is that the quarterback position over the last month has been played at the highest level in college football. I mean, I don't know how you could play it any better than Nussmeier plays the spot. And Saturday was another performance on that just carrying on the consistent play. Very, very impressed with the way that Nussmeier. I mean, I think he's played himself into like a top 20, top 25 pick. I mean, Shedeur Sanders continues to dazzle. I mean, the plays that he made the other night, he looks, the part where he could potentially be a number 1 pick type discussion. But the more you look around college football, I mean, at this point, I'm biased. I would take Garrett Nussmeier over Carson Beck.
Well,
I mean,
Cam Ward. That's the class he's in.
He's in that discussion. But I mean, Carson Beck was the guy that they were shoving down my throat in the offseason as the number one pick, and he was the guy that was going to be the Heisman favorite. And I mean, I get that Cam Ward's kind of come out and become like the new sexy pick of, a Heisman watch candidate. But you can't play the position any better than Nussmeier plays it.
And I'll agree with you just looking at some of the numbers. Like, you've had pretty consistent play. Carson Beck's last game is obviously the thing you think of first. 15 of 24 against a Kentucky team that we don't know anything about for 160 yards. I don't think that Nussmeier does that. I think you can bookend 250. And whether that's a testament to, LSU was actually finally able to get a good run game going. Right. And he was still through for, 300 yards plus. And you just saw
352, I think.
Yeah, 352. And you just saw some of his ability to layer the football and get Aaron Anderson involved. It's the second game he's thrown to completed passes to at least 9 different players.
9 receivers, yeah.
But that's what's elite, is he spreads the ball around. It's not just a Kyron Lacey like you saw against USC. It was Kyron Lacey. And now the fact that he's been able to – nobody's a bigger advocate for Mason Taylor than I am. Well, maybe Brian Kelly, but –
That was weird.
But – he is getting him involved, and you saw that. I mean, I think everybody kind of had a feeling Mason Taylor was a pro, and this is probably his last year also.
Yeah.
But the way that he gets the pass game going with Mason Taylor is what you lose with Jaden Daniels' legs. Right. That's what we thought would happen, kind of an extension of the run game where he kind of drops it off to Mason Taylor. He makes a great catch on a third down and kind of gets that offense going. He bails him out a lot.
Yeah, he does.
And so does Aaron Anderson. That's another guy, early in the game, I think it was the second drive, they had gotten to a third down early, and Aaron Anderson made a heck of a play coming back and getting underneath the football. And he relies on Aaron and Mason a lot on those big downs. Those are the guys he looks to. So, but I think when you're talking about Nussmeier, just strictly from an arm talent perspective, I don't know who else in the country really has that
ability
Whip.
Like him,
Maybe Ewers.
Yeah. I just think when NFL coaches are looking, they're probably like, we can work with that.
Absolutely. We can win with that. After watching a lot of football yesterday.
Right.
You look around the NFL.
Will Levis.
Yeah.
I did it again.
Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
Oh, he figured out if I just throw it to Malik Neighbors every play.
I think Dayball. They ran a jet sweep on 4th and 2 to him.
Yeah.
They went Stephon Sullivan back in the day. We're desperate.
Canada.
We're desperate.
Oh, Canada.
But they're just get it to my best player.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's Malik Neighbors, who the body control on the touchdown.
Unreal. It reminded me of Josh Reed, the Peach Bowl, when he tapped his toes with Rohan against Georgia Tech. If you've ever seen the highlight, Josh Reed makes a catch where you're like, there's no way he can get his feet down. He taps his toe. Malik Neighbors, the same thing. When you watch that thing full speed, game speed, you're like, no way he got his feet down.
It looks like he's slow.
And then you slow it down, you're like, that is like some
freaky.
That is wild.
And we've seen it for 2 years.
Right.
And you're still like, damn, he's doing it on the NFL field too. CJ Daniels almost did the same thing.
He
just
did.
didn't get the
He did.
Still didn't get to look at that enough.
He did. I think LSU's receivers are okay. I think they're emerging as a spot that, you've got a lot of the concerns of what we had for Kyron Lacey going into the season have popped up a little bit. Just the inconsistency. For every touchdown grab he makes, every solid catch he makes, there's that easy drop. There's that easy catch that you have to make that you're like, how does that one hit the ground? But that's all, that's kind of the scouting report on him. But when you check her down the line here of Aaron Anderson and Kyle Parker and CJ Daniels, and they're trying with Shelton Sampson.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's good or bad.
I don't either. I can't put my thumb on it because they got a lot of footballs to be spread around on this team. You know what I mean? They got a lot of people that can catch, and you could leave the stat line. You could leave the game with a stat line, it feels like, where you've got, 8, 9, 10 guys who have caught the ball. When you throw in those tight ends, Mason Taylor's going to get his. You would think that you would see at some point Pimpton and Green get into it. You know you've got Lacey. You know you've got Anderson. You know you've got Daniels. Kyle Parker's emerging as a guy. Shelton Sampson's being run out there. The running backs are going to catch a few. I mean, there are weapons. There are guys that can fill a stat line out. And when you got a trigger puller like Nussmeier, I mean, everybody's in play.
Yeah, no, somebody, when we did the post-game show on Saturday, and somebody in the chat said something about being upset that Nussmeier got checked down happy in the second half. I was like, people were calling for Nussmeier to start throwing check downs the whole time he's been at LSU. Like, his issue was that he didn't.
He's a gunslinger.
He didn't check down. Because those two throws back-to-back to Caleb Jackson where he just kind of dumped it off, I loved.
Me too.
Because Jackson was able to get momentum and then break the tackles. Like, you've been waiting for Caleb Jackson to break tackles and make plays. Well, he's been getting hit by defensive tackles and defensive linemen at the line of scrimmage, you know? And so he was able to get a little momentum moving forward.
There's an old saying, you can't go broke taking a profit.
Yep.
And that's what he did at the end of the game in the second
Absolutely.
half, where they just kept moving
Take
forward.
what they give you, man.
Like, we don't have to force anything. If
Chew
you're
off
LSU.
these chunks of yards.
Yeah,
don't worry about it. Yeah, I mean, that's
Caleb Jackson open. Okay, you tackle him.
yeah, right. They're giving you the answers.
Xavier Thomas. That punt return catch was
Wow,
UCLA's got some soccer players.
Yeah.
They were booming
They
the
were.
football.
They played their best. I mean, like,
It was hot.
And poor Justin, we got in here. He was all sunburnt on the side. You could see where the sun was hitting him.
Should be illegal.
it should be.
That was
tough.
With Rebecca's dad, she goes, "This has to be illegal. We need to call the government."
Especially when you're just looking across the field and see
the east
people,
side.
everybody just
Dying.
chilling on the beach.
Yeah. Well, and you saw that kind of bear witness with UCLA on that side. They were in the sun the entire game, and by the second half, it was, let's go back to California.
Yeah. No,
But they did play their best.
It beat them up. No, I was very impressed with
Garbage.
a team exactly. Eric Bieniemy called a great game, but Ethan Garbers, who through the first couple of weeks looked like garbage.
Yeah.
That
he will
first
remember
drive.
his time in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Sure.
first drive, Bieniemy got him comfortable.
Kansas City.
I mean, because they were blitzing. I mean, LSU was sending guys every
And
every
Bieniemy
play.
was doing some incredible pre-snap.
Right.
Like he saw where the
schemed
blitz
it
was
up.
coming.
Yeah.
I mean, he was doing a little like McVay to golf. Like, yo, throw it here. It's
The
going
answer
to
to the
be
test.
wide open.
Well, that's what happens when you have LSU who brings pressure. So if you have a coordinator, like we've been wondering what Bieniemy is, what the arc is for him, but he's definitely seen probably if you're going to blitz like that, I've got blitz beaters, and it's like Garber's here. Here you go, do this,
Right
and that's
there.
what it looked like.
Yeah.
But another LSU game where you look at the second half and go, defense got it figured out.
Yep.
Like give up 0 points.
Yeah. I mean,
It's that you really can't put your finger on this football team.
Right. Because not
Can't be
even just the defense in the second half. They got the stop on the first drive, and then the first offensive drive, they go 96 yards, 14 plays,
Run it.
6.5
they
minutes.
looked beautiful.
And I was like, that's what we were talking about before USC. Like, that's what the offense is supposed to look like.
it was.
If that's the team that you get for 4 quarters, they have a chance in a lot of these football games going forward.
I think they do. I'm almost. I also am a little reserved.
Of course.
on that. You know what I
Of
mean?
course.
It's like, and now with taking Perkins out of the lineup,
Oh,
Right.
much more concerned about potentially what could happen with this defense, because there still are shades of what they looked like over the past year, right? The tackling is still
Suspect.
poor. I will tell you who looked go back and watch the 6 or 7 snaps that Don McKinley play.
He did.
My boy can get off the ball. I mean, like,
He shocked the
he
center.
is.
He's like, "Who are you?"
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, put him in the third and fourth quarter. People
Right.
are like, oh my God, it's a bullet coming through. And maybe he's not ready mentally. Maybe he's not ready even to take that step as a guy that you
Bet
can
he
throw
feels good
in.
today.
But let me tell you, he had to take some strides after Saturday, because you can play here.
Yeah.
Like, you belong. You need to be on the field. After watching, and this is no disrespect, and this is where LSU's going to run into a big problem, in my opinion, is that, some of these guys, Shone Washington, Gio Paez is, I think you're getting the maximum out of him. You talk about some of those guys. It just, when SEC football starts, man, that is not what SEC defensive lines look like. If you turned on the game in Norman, Oklahoma on Saturday and saw Tennessee's defense and Oklahoma's defense and what they looked like up front, that's what SEC defensive lines look like. That's what the rotations look like. I'm not nervous about LSU's offensive line going up against premier defensive lines. I'm worried about when the other team gets the ball and what LSU's going to do, specifically 3 weeks from now when the lane train pulls in.
Right.
And you can't overlook what Major Applewhite in South Alabama is bringing in on Saturday, especially on that side of the ball. I mean, have they scored 80 points in 2 games? I think they're averaging like 45 points a game. I mean, this is a team that from a offensive standpoint is as confident as probably any group in the country. You have a Baton Rouge native in Major Applewhite, who's the head coach, coming into Tiger Stadium on Saturday. I'm sure he's got his group on edge, ready to play. They also see a team that is vulnerable.
Yeah.
If you're South Alabama and you're looking at LSU and you take Perkins out of the lineup and take him off the field defensively, this is going to be the first game without him, and Applewhite and the Jaguars kind of get their first swing at him. So this is a week that they have to get prepared for. This will be a great test to get ready for Ole Miss. And it's kind of scary to think about, what Ole Miss potentially could bring in here. And where LSU is kind of, LSU to me feels like a little bit of a fighter on the ropes that kind of is bouncing off and getting back into the middle of the ring, but pretty quick you can combination punch them back into the ropes. And they've shown signs that you can knock them out.
Right.
And there's teams on the schedule that if they get knocked out, I don't know how they get back up. And I'm not here to, the sky is burning. I'm just saying the potential of you lose Perkins. I mean, in a month to lose the players that they have. Even throwing Chris Hilton into the mix, because at what point does Hilton come back? You definitely would have thought that he would have been back.
It was probable.
I mean, you want to get him a little bit of run before the Ole Miss game, right? I mean, you don't want him going into the bye and not playing any football. To me, that would say how serious the injury is. If they don't want to get him any run before you really get into the teeth of this thing, this has been a major setback. And at that point, I don't even know what the contribution level would be expected at, but you lose Jacoby and Guillory, John Emery, Harold Perkins in 3 out of the first 4 weeks of the season. Throw Hilton into the mix. I mean, not only are we talking about guys that are huge impact players on the field, all 3 starters, you're also talking about guys in the locker room and on the sideline and in the huddle that mean something, especially Tank and Perk, right? I mean, I know John Emery, he's a likable guy in the locker room. Jacoby and Guillory is a vocal leader in the locker room. Harold Perkins is an example guy in the locker room. I mean, you kind of look at him and say, watch 7, watch the effort he gives, watch this is how you do it. And, you lose all 3 of those guys before you get to October. I mean, hell, before you even get out of September. A tough draw. I mean, it's a tough draw. And, now from LSU's defensive standpoint, when you take Perkins off the field. And remember, Daily, we're brought to you by Go Roof, online at GEAUXroof.com, 225-927-8300. A beautiful roof every single time when you deal with our friends over at Go Roof. Tons of experience, 15 years, community service, been around the community. They understand who they're working with, what they're working for. They love Baton Rouge and South Louisiana, but that's not the only place they service. They can get in touch with them today and let them service your roof or install a brand new one for you, whether it's commercial or residential. 225-927-8300 or online at geauxroof.com. All right, so do you look at one of these freshmen, Kalaj Cobbins,
Right.
Tylen Singleton, guys that came in here, Xavier Atkins? I mean, there were some high-end players in this linebacking recruiting class. When you talk about the group of 2024, I don't know if there's a more impressive unit outside the offensive line haul that they brought in better than the linebackers. So maybe this is where you start to see some of these young guys pop up and make an impact. Maybe they shift back to a 4-2-5 look, which I think is most probable to start.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they did when he went out the game. They shifted Major back to the star and put Jordan Allen back out there. So I think that's probably the most likely decision. I think that's probably what they'll come out in against South Alabama to start the
easy,
game.
quick fix.
And so, but we'll see. Because I do think when you look at Devon Keys, Tylen Singleton, Kalaj Cobbins, Atkins, that's a lot of talent. It just depends if, it is kind of hard for these coaches to put these young guys on the field if they're not mentally ready.
Yeah.
That's why I think you're seeing some of these busts that are happening, especially this was kind of the first time you saw the secondary really get exposed a little bit. So that's been more tackling than anything in run fits. That's all we've been talking about for 3 weeks. UCLA, they kind of schemed you up and got you open, and you keep adding younger players into the fold. The consistency is not going to be there because they just haven't done it yet. And so you're trying to sacrificing scheme for talent. And at what point does it no longer weigh well on the Lieber scale?
Yeah.
And the more you say stuff like that, the more you're like, maybe not year 3, maybe year 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is they're getting better.
Yeah.
They're adding talent.
They definitely are.
This is like year 2.
You cannot argue that. You can't argue that they're adding talent. You can't argue that I think overall the program is in the right direction, improving. It's the same thing I wondered 3 weeks ago that I continue to wonder about now. When you look around the league and you see the teams that are either on top or pressing towards the elite status, which Tennessee, in my opinion, has kicked the door in. They are in the discussion of a team that can win the league. If you're Georgia, Alabama, and Texas, you're looking at Tennessee a little bit differently this morning than you were on Friday morning. I mean, the way that they went in there and won, Nico not playing as well as he could, going in there and turning the ball over. They were highly penalized. They had 10 penalties in Norman. That was an emotional night for their head coach, and they won in a different style. They won by just kind of beating you up, more rugged, physical, defensive style of play. That was an SEC win. And again, and I don't mean to keep saying this of what used to, but that's what LSU used to look like. When LSU would get off the bus, they had 8 guys at defensive line that they could rotate at you, that the 7th one was as good as the 3rd one. And the top 2 were All-Americans. And that's that's where they have to get. I mean, Oklahoma had a 6-man rotation up front. Texas has got a rotation up front. Georgia, Alabama, LSU, we want to talk about them like they're in that class, but they're not. They're not right now. I mean, they're still on that outside looking in, and it's because of the way that they're built. It's because of the way that they're put together. And my concern 3 weeks ago, coming back from Vegas, is still here going into the last week of September. LSU lacks a killer instinct. LSU needs some type of killer mentality, and I wonder if Brian Kelly is the coach that can teach that, put that in, make that the calling card of the program. Because you look around, and the teams that have it, it's very obvious. And LSU feels like they should be in that discussion. But the more football you watch play, the more you realize it's not in year 3. I'm not saying, and I'm with Lloyd, it could be getting there, and it's heading in the right direction and improving. But that would be my reservation on LSU at this point. You know,
They'll be in every football game they play. They can win every football game they play. But it's starting to get to the point of, okay, you keep saying these things are fixable and correctable. At what point are they haven't played their best football yet? They've shown glimpses, and I think that's why people are. But answer me this: if it goes the other way around, where you don't give up any points in the first 2 quarters, but you give up 17 in the second half, do people view the team differently? Or they're like, look, you came out, started fast, defense is humming. Oh, and you gave up a couple points on the back end.
Because I believe, look, my judgment of last week's success was bludgeoning UCLA. That was, to me, going to determine how good of a team LSU was, because that's what good teams do against bad teams. They can't control who they play. They control how they play.
You doubled them up.
I get that. But that game was too physical of a matchup back and forth than it should have been. LSU should have bullied that team into submission for 4 quarters. And having them pushed around for 2 quarters, I think is a detriment to them. They won the game 34-17. They were obviously the better team. They played like it in the second half. Whether they would have played like it in the first half and failed in the second half, it's still where you failed to beat a team for 4 quarters like you should have, which my concern is that's what good teams with a killer mentality do. Right? And I'm not.
But the killer mentality is shutting them out in the second half.
Yeah. My concern.
2 quarters.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
what I'm saying. I think that they're.
I'm saying that a 4-quarter game is what I was looking for on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of last week.
Right.
I didn't get it, so I don't think that it's
still haven't seen a complete
huge
game.
Successful of a weekend for LSU.
I agree.
Right? Throw in the mix that you lose Harold Perkins, and I would call it almost
pretty bad weekend.
It's not good. You know, I mean, it's not a good weekend of leaving UCLA being shoved around for 2 quarters and losing your best defensive player.
Yeah, injuries happen.
Yeah.
That's not really
right.
It does. It's not. You definitely don't put it in the pro column. But I don't think that's anything that a coach can do about that or a team can do about that. They happen, and you've seen that. Like in 2019, you had one player get hurt. Like Grant Delpit had an ankle,
right?
And it takes kind of those magical moments to come together to be a national championship team where you don't lose anybody.
Yeah.
And you've lost Jacoby and Guillory, John Emery, and now your best defensive player in Harold Perkins. But I think that people make their narrative around LSU in the first half, and they forget to kind of watch the rest of the football game.
Right. Well,
I'm just talking about from a general consensus of, like, if you look at the Nichols game and now the UCLA game, they're like, oh, LSU, blow them out. And Oregon just beat Idaho 24-14. They're still talked about as one of the top teams in the country.
Not in my book.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that's still because.
But I mean, if you listen nationally, they don't have the same respect.
No, but
Texas,
they're still top 4.
Texas,
right.
Georgia, but you throw
Tennessee.
them in the Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee into the mix. I'll take all 4 of those teams versus Oregon at their place or on a neutral field 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's because my eyeballs tell me that they're just not a physical, dominant group. Those 4 teams that I named up until this point are. We talk about LSU like they're in that class, or that at least they deserve to be in that class. Name recognizable, they do. This season, they're not. And to me, the reason why they're not is they're not built like that. They're not built the way that those teams are built. And by calling year 3 as the judgment year in Brian Kelly, he'd like to have that statement back, I'm sure. Because in year 3, you're not built to the point where you should be judged. You know what I mean? The judgment on you is that you're not, your team and roster is not sufficient enough to fight for a league title.
Yeah.
I still think they could.
Yeah. You think they could beat Georgia and Texas and Alabama and Ole Miss in Atlanta? You think they could go on a neutral
Absolutely.
field? Playing with them is one thing. You think they could beat those?
I just saw
teams?
Kentucky and Georgia go 13-12. LSU going to score. I'll take that offense anywhere.
I'll take that offense anywhere too. What are you going to do with that defense?
Blake Baker's defense, you had 5 sacks. I think the way that they scheme it up, they're creating turnover opportunities, the havoc rate, and all of those things where you're going to be in every football game. You may give up some busts, but you're playing and you're playing hard. and you're playing like you could say it's not physical. What Weeks was everywhere. Like the more you continue to play with these guys, you can't have any more injuries. But there's nothing you can do about that because that's what's killing you right now. But LSU was in every football game. I'll continue to say that because they have the offense that travels, and you found a little bit of the run game. Like that's going to happen whenever you're throwing it for 350 every game.
Right.
Like you're gonna keep losing if you just let Garrett Nussmeier go crazy. So okay, we'll give up a little bit in the run game. Then LSU imposes its will. Defense gets the rest, and keep playing at 2:30 on Saturday in Tiger Stadium. You just melt on the other side.
No, I can see it.
I get that.
My biggest concern coming out of Saturday was after South Carolina, the thing you had circled was 17-0. Can't come out slow defensively. And that's still, to me, that's still circled coming out of UCLA. Like that was your number one thing you wanted to fix, and you really didn't get it fixed. Even with receiving the ball and marching down the field the way they did. Because, I mean, that first offensive drive was
beautiful. But
and so it puts you in a spot where you're up 7-0, you have 7 points, and I get that. But that did not roll over to the defense. Because although they came out a little more aggressive play call-wise on that first drive, the back end didn't make the plays when the plays were right there to be made. And I think that kind of rolled over throughout the game.
Yeah, I think you got young guys back there.
That was my number 2 thing on the list after watching the game was the defensive backfield's going to have to make plays at some – because you can't expect Braden Swinson to get a strip sack every
game.
Swinson.
You know what I mean?
It's unbelievable.
All-American.
Or Gio
Didn't play
Paez.
last year.
Right.
Unreal.
And Deshaun Womack looked great.
He did look good.
You can't expect that because I feel like when they get to third downs, they're just kind of hoping that front seven is going to make a play.
Right.
Because they get pressure, and then if the quarterback just makes a half-decent play, the defensive backfield is just kind of back there like,
tackle.
Oh, what are we supposed to do now?
Right.
So that's where my concern is. They came out kind of not the entrance you wanted into Tiger State. You wanted touchdown, stop, touchdown, because then you saw the defense when UCLA marched down the field, that rolled over to the offense. That second offensive drive was never pretty from the jump. Like you had Aaron Anderson had to make a heck of a play to get you out of a 3-and-out. And then you saw Kyron Lacey with which was his worst drop of the season so far on third down. And then you go for it on fourth down and kind of hope for a PI that doesn't happen. And so, that's where it just kind of went flat.
Yeah.
And so, to me, the start fast, don't start slow deal is still circled going into South Alabama.
They almost tried to force fast.
Right. And it didn't work.
No.
So.
Definitely wish they had Mississippi State and Arkansas on it. On the schedule this year.
They've got Arkansas.
Excuse me, Auburn.
Auburn, yeah.
Mississippi State.
Good Lord.
How do you wake up?
Made Florida look so good.
Billy saved your job.
It was a dogfight for a quarter and a half.
Yeah.
I mean.
That's I put that football game on for a second. It's like, I'm a sicko. I don't even want to watch this.
I know.
I'll watch anything else. I'll put it on PBS.
I was like, this is elementary still. I mean.
It is football, technically.
Football.
I was like, there's somebody out there that bet this game, and
No
it was
doubt.
me. I bet the under, and it did not hit.
No, because Florida ran it up.
I forgot about Sunbelt Billy.
I mean, he's
Graham
trying to
found his offense.
change the narrative over there.
Changing the narrative.
Yeah.
That's right. Remember our